Hey, what's up guys? It's Matt with the Movement System. Wait a second. Greetings viewers, it's Dr. Castoro here to talk about the efficacy of the Doctoral of Physical Therapy program. Just kidding, but in all seriousness, I did just graduate with my doctorate of physical therapy from Ohio State University, and I wanted to give you guys my thoughts on my expectations going into the program, what I actually got out of the program, my experience with it, and then some statistics to see if you might actually benefit from a physical therapy program or not. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Alright, so the way we're going to break down this video is we're going to start with an overview of my experience in the program, then we're going to get into money, time, the difficulty of the PT program, the best PT programs to go to, or does that really matter? And then also alternatives to physical therapy. Let's start off with an overview. So a physical therapy program is now a doctorate. So you can't get a master's in physical therapy. Years ago you could, but they've now fully transitioned all programs to doctorates. So it's a 3-year program. Some programs are like 2.5 years, but for the most part it's pretty standard that you're going to be there for 3 years. It is a graduate program, meaning you already have to have had an undergraduate degree with certain prerequisites. You don't need a certain degree. A lot of people have a biology, an exercise science, kinesiology type background, but as long as you meet the prerequisites and you have a decent resume for your application, you can get into PT school with really any undergraduate degree. That said, it is very competitive to get into physical therapy, especially top programs. My GPA, I just looked this up, from undergrad was 3.662, and I was actually the last person accepted into the Ohio State Physical Therapy program. Quick side note, I know you're probably gonna have different questions that I'm not gonna get into in this video. You can leave a comment. You can follow me on Instagram at The Movement System. Send me a DM there. I'm gonna try to be as good of a resource as I can for you guys. Another thing that's important to know about physical therapy school is that there's going to be some combination of clinical experience and classroom learning. Clinical experiences differ based on your program, but clinicals are basically when you're working directly in the clinic with a physical therapist, watching what they're doing, and then also participating as a student physical therapy in patients' plans of care. So that can range anywhere from 30 weeks up towards over a year, depending on the program. But in general, if you're just looking for like a rule of thumb, about a year out of your 3-year experience will probably be focused on clinicals, and about 2 years or 2/3 of your education will be spent on classroom education. All right, so now that we have the groundwork of what physical therapy school is, we're going to talk about my expectations going into physical therapy school versus how it actually turned out through my 3-year experience. So my background was in exercise science as well as personal training and strength conditioning, and that's really what I did for my 4 years of undergrad and for a gap year before physical therapy school. So whenever I was going into physical therapy school, I expected a lot of knowledge on movement and exercise technique and programming and different things involved in strength conditioning and personal training. That's really not a big focus of physical therapy school. In reality, it turned out that only about maybe 25% of the time was really focused on musculoskeletal or anatomy, which is kind of what I expected to be the majority of physical therapy school. So musculoskeletal, meaning like muscles, bones, like the muscular system of the body. Those kind of things relate more to athletes and the rehab of like orthopedic injuries, which is really what I thought physical therapy was. But it turns out there's a ton of time spent in physical therapy on geriatrics, pediatrics, neuro, acute care, oncology, and then a lot of these other fields of physical therapy or disciplines of physical therapy that really don't have any implication to athletes or very small implications to athletes. Now it's important to know the doctorate of physical therapy is a general doctorate degree. It's supposed to make you a good general practitioner. So it's not like a master's program in, for example, Masters of Strength Conditioning, where you're trying to really specialize on one area of strength conditioning. Rather, in a doctorate of physical therapy program, you're learning a little bit about quite a few areas. So one big takeaway of my experience versus my expectations was that the doctorate of physical therapy program was much more broad than I expected. Now this could be a pro or a con depending on your experience and what you want to get out of it. For me, I really went into the physical therapy program wanting to be a advanced strength and conditioning coach or a sports clinical specialist, someone who works directly with athletes, with high-level athletes, rehabbing injuries and optimizing performance. And that was my expectation going into the program. And I really expected to just be able to learn a little bit about everything else, but focus on that. And that really didn't turn out to be my experience. All right, so another expectation, this one is somewhat debatable, but I'm just going to speak on my experience of this. and I thought that it would be easier to get into physical therapy school than it actually was. I just looked this up and I had a 3.662 undergraduate GPA. I had good personal training experience, average to not great letters from professors. I went to a big school, Ohio State, and I went to professors that kind of just churn out pretty generic letters. So not great letters, but an overall okay application. And my first year applying to Ohio State, Ohio University, Slippery Rock University, Pitt, and University of Cincinnati, I got rejected by all 5 of them. And that really was a surprise to me. I thought that I had a pretty strong application going in, and I also had the minimum observation hours for a lot of these programs, so it wasn't an entire surprise, but to me, I thought that I had enough to get into a program or multiple programs, and I actually ended up getting rejected to all of them. So that was a surprise to me. Other people have had different experiences, but to me, applying to physical therapy school was actually harder than I expected. That said, during my gap year, I retook anatomy, rewrote my essays, got a great letter of recommendation from my anatomy professor because I really went above and beyond in that class. And then I also got more observation hours and made my essays really clear that physical therapy was my number one pursuit and that was what I was going to be focused on. And with those revisions, that actually helped me get into multiple top 10 schools and have choices of where to go for physical therapy school. So if you are in a gap year or if you don't have a strong application, it's not a big deal. You can work for a year, get really great experience. And actually, I'm really glad that I did that gap year. It actually helped me get experience in strength conditioning and working with athletes and working out in the real world, getting out of the books for a year. And I actually thought that set the foundation for my business, my YouTube channel, a lot of the personal training that I did during physical therapy school, and a lot of things. So I was actually really happy in hindsight with that gap year. So don't take it as a negative or like you're a failure or anything if that's what you have to do as well. One point that will also be debatable is that I actually thought, and this is just based on my experience, that physical therapy school was fairly easy compared to what I expected. So for me, I had 30, 40 hours a week that I was working outside of physical therapy school through most of school and managed that just fine. I didn't feel tremendously stressed other than maybe like a few times throughout the entire experience of physical therapy school. There were definitely classmates of mine who were very stressed and spent all their time studying, and that was their experience. But for me, getting a good GPA, I just checked this for the first time actually in 3 years, and my PT school GPA was 3.585, which is fine. Like, I don't think that people with a 3.4 or with a 3.7 are going to have significantly different career experiences or miss out on opportunities with jobs. It really just is about learning, becoming a good clinician, making good relationships, having good clinical experiences. All right, so let's talk about a concept that's actually really important to consider whenever you're applying to PT school or considering PT school, and that's money. So PT school is expensive. Not only is the tuition cost expensive, but also the opportunity cost of not working for 3 years potentially. Now, this isn't my exact situation. I'm just going to use average numbers, but I actually worked throughout physical therapy school to help pay for school and stuff like that. But according to the APTA, the average PT student graduates with $116,000 of debt. Now, $116,000 may seem like an abstract number, but based on my research at least, it takes about 16 years for a physical therapist to pay this off. So $116,000 of student loans, at least my student loan interest rate is 6.6%. So at 6.6%, if you're paying $1,000 per month, it would take you 15 years to pay off $116,000 of debt. So student loans are a real serious concern, and you should actually really be considering this when you're going into physical therapy school, because it's really going to affect the next 10 plus years of your life potentially. Now, physical therapists on average do make a pretty good salary, around $80,000. Again, this ranges quite a bit, and whenever you're looking at one program versus the next, really the education is going to be similar program to program. And my recommendation for what program to actually go to is one, whatever program will let you go there, whichever one you actually get accepted to, and then also one that's cost effective, but also a good education and a place that you're going to like. But yeah, make sure you actually do consider that cost as a factor within your decision making. So that leads us into a discussion of time, and really you're talking about a 3-year commitment for physical therapy school. You may be spending a full year getting prerequisites, doing applications, and focusing on that as well. So it's definitely something to really take a look at, and don't just do it because it seems like the next thing to do after an exercise science degree. Like, really consider your different career options and some of the alternatives that we're going to talk about. The overwhelming number of students who started my class, we had a class of 50 when we started, and we graduated with a class of 48. So the overwhelming majority of students actually continued all the way through the program and passed. And 95% plus students out of at least the Ohio State graduating class passed boards on the first try. So really, once you're into PT school, if you want to do it, you usually can continue through the program. That said, all the physical therapists that I've talked to and other physical therapy students that I've talked to have considered some of these alternative careers. Physical therapy assistant, this is actually a really good career. It's less schooling, it's less cost. You do make a little bit less in terms of a salary, but it's a really similar job day to day. Really, physical therapy assistants aren't really doing evaluation, but they're still having a lot of time treating patients in the clinic. That's a really good alternative to physical therapy. Also, nursing. Nursing has a bit more of a hierarchy than physical therapy. You can continue your education to a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant. You can change the setting that you're working in. So especially physical therapy students who come in with an interest in acute care and working with patients in a hospital really should consider nursing as an alternative to physical therapy. And then also medical school is a pretty good alternative to physical therapy. Medical school is a little bit more rigorous in terms of cost, total time, time commitment during school, clinical requirements, and the competitiveness of the program. But it is a different salary range, a lot of different opportunities on the other end of medical school. So it's a good alternative to consider as well. And also, there are a lot of opportunities outside of graduate degrees. So things like personal training. Personal training has been a really great job for me all throughout undergrad and throughout grad school. Personal training pays just as much per hour or more than physical therapy does. Usually the hours are a little bit weird because you have to work in the mornings and at nights to accommodate clients. But that said, there's a lot of different opportunities in personal training to work with multiple clients, to work with clients online, to work with the population that you want. So it's a really great career, and it's not by any means a step below a physical therapist, it's just an alternative. And then some other ones to consider would be things like massage therapy, clinical exercise physiologist, or another field in health science. So you may be wondering, after 3 years of being in the physical therapy program, would I do it again? And the answer to that is actually yes. I actually would decide to go back and do it again if I had the same opportunity. I think that physical therapy school in the long run for me, in my situation, is actually going to pay off. I really appreciate the education I've been able to get and the opportunities that's going to give me on the other end. That said, I think I would have done fine without physical therapy school. I think I could have done really well in personal training and strength conditioning and building an online business. So I don't think that I would have had a significant difference with or without physical therapy school. That's not going to be the case for everybody. Some people really want to spend their time in the clinic and really enjoy being in the clinic 40 hours a week, hustling with patients, working, doing documentation, giving exercises, doing continuing education. A lot of the things involved in physical therapy, other people get bogged down by the amount of work, the amount of documentation, the relatively low pay to debt ratio, and other things about physical therapy. But one thing I can't answer is the question of should you go to physical therapy school, because I don't know your expectations, your goals, what level of debt and income you're comfortable with, and your priorities. But that said, hopefully seeing my experience with physical therapy school gives you a little bit of insight and helps you make that decision. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. Smash the like button and subscribe for more videos like this in the future, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.